This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn. I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
Hey guys, it is Tristan with That's NewsStand, and today we're going to talk about the other history of the DC Universe, number 3. Now, first off, there are a couple things I want to say before I get into this. If you hear background noise, my cats are quite possibly found some crack from the past residents. My God, they won't quit. I've given them like half an hour. I'm done waiting. This should cancel out most of the noise, but I'm hoping it sounds okay. Now, the other thing I want to say is before I went into this review, as I read this book, and it took me 3 days, John Ridley, that's on you. I actually, before doing this review, went back to DC fandom because I like to look at people as humans, not writers, not artists, not people online. I like to hear their words and know from their perspective why they're writing things. I want to humanize people. I don't want to sit here and go critically over this work without knowing why he created that work, if that makes sense. So I look at this from a little bit different perspective than I think most people do that review comics. If these stories are going to be told, if they're going to be done, they need to be done in a format where they're about the character, and that's my main gripe. This was better than the past two, but there are parts in this that he dead stop the story that's being told and talks about the history of the United States. And it's not from Katana's perspective. It's not from anything other than, hey, this happened in 1982 and America sucks. And that's not how this story should be told. That's not how any story should be told. And actually going over the DC fandom, he said that he was inspired by the other history, or the history of the DC universe, which was a story told in 1986 by Marv Wolfman. And it was a story told about the history of the DC universe from Harbinger's point of view, right? She was going through and documenting everything. It had nothing to do, very rarely touched on real U.S. politics, very rarely touched on what was done as far as a random murder in 1982. Now, I know it's not random, I'm just using that as an example. So, if that was your inspiration, you took it leaps and bounds beyond an actual inspiration and made it something quite possibly its own. Now, unfortunately, Comic-Con has been very weird the past 6 months, but I am curious to see what the numbers are for this, if we ever get numbers again from DC, which is really unfortunate because a lot of it's just estimations. I don't get why, and there's not even any numbers for 2021 from DC, so regardless, I would like to see the numbers for this because I think these are more collector's pieces by the covers, right? And not necessarily even made to be, I don't know, even made to be read. I would hate to push it that far because I do know there's people that like it, but let's take a look at it. I just make it lengthy, and I apologize if it does, but there's a lot I want to talk about, and at least one thing I can say positive before we get going is he took Tatsu and he didn't make her a victim. He did not make her a victim. And that's what we've seen in number 1 and 2 when it came to Black Lightning and Mal and Bumblebee. We saw them made victims of a society they couldn't help themselves in. Not Tatsu. She overcame. And I really like that. And there's actually one part that I absolutely adore. And we'll get into that. But, so this is the other history of the DC universe. Now, this was done by John Ridley. The art is by Giuseppe Camuncoli. Beautiful art. Does a great job. He is, nothing of this is his fault. So, we basically get the backstory, right? And I think it makes a lot more sense. I apologize. It makes a lot more sense to see the book and not me. We get Tatsu's backstory, Katana's backstory. And a lot of these names I'm not even going to try to say. That's the American in me, right? Oh, that's mean to say. No, that I can't. I can't even say sometimes a complete sentence. So it's nothing disrespectful. I just can't. I can say her husband's name was Maseo and her son's names was Yuki and Rico. I got that. That's as far as we're going to go with that because I don't want to be disrespectful. Now, we learned some things I actually didn't know about Katana, like the fact that she was never a martial artist. She was actually a gymnast. And that's, it was just kind of the whole, like, be very graceful. And people assumed because of her ethnicity that she was a martial artist. So she just went with it. Just like she used to talk to herself in the field and people thought that she was talking to Soul Taker. And she just kind of went with it. Kind of along the same lines of the Batman mythos, right? And we're going to talk about that because the Batman mythos is more than briefly touched on with the Outsiders. And like I said in my previous videos on these subjects, I'm not a huge Outsiders fan. I don't actually know anybody that is, to be honest with you. I did like Brian Edward Hill's run, but I am ignorant to the older stuff, so I want to get that out of the way. Now, when they talk about Batman, they say, Batman, he didn't kill people. But he did, well, here, let's just zoom in a little bit. He didn't kill people. He basically, he refused to take a life. He was self-righteous, right? But he would beat them within an inch of her life. And I get it. I never understood that. But he says, they keep going, but he didn't kill people, allegedly. He didn't kill people, but he does this. He didn't kill people, but he does this. Oh my God, hush. Stop it. I'll cut that. But she says, but I have no doubt that there are bodies buried all over Gotham City because of him. Yeah, they definitely allude to the fact that he is a murderer, right? Okay. So we meet the Outsiders and they talk about the different jobs they did. And man, some of this stuff is, I've said it so many times. Some of this stuff, John Ridley has the bones for the message, right? But the delivery is off. You're trying to teach a story. And I've kind of noticed, reoccurring themes. You're trying to teach a story that, it doesn't have to be extremism versus extremism. If you actually, what's the best way to put it? If you're able to overcome, what you have wrong with you, everybody's going to be better off together. I guess is the best way to put it. And I actually didn't even catch on to those themes till number 2. But your delivery is very, very off. They go through the 80s. And this is where it gets to the point where it's like real history. Not DC history. Not anything like that. They're going to talk about xenophobia in the 80s. They're going to talk about stuff that's never existed in the DC universe. The DC universe, DC Comics, is escapism. It's something you read when you had a bad day at work. You come home and you're like, fuck, I don't know what to do. What's Superman up to? I'm going to throw on some music and, I'm going to relax on my couch. Yeah, that's me. But not to read, it became belligerent, hostile, openly xenophobic. Japanese flags were burned in public. Japanese cars were publicly trashed and surrogates of our success. The fearsome, inscrutable Asian became the straw man of American politics and media. John Ridley isn't writing DC Comics. John Ridley's writing John Ridley's politics into your books. Now, one thing that's also very clear in here is that he isn't going to give you more than any information that you need. He's going to shape the information within this as you should be believing this way. So if A and B both exist, he's going to only tell you about A, is what I mean. But They talk about, the different times Asian had become, or, the target of fear. And I'm not here to say that these things don't exist. I'm not even saying that at all. What I'm saying is I'm reviewing a comic book. A comic book. This is something that's very difficult for me to want to pick up and read. Like I said, it took me 3 days, 4 separate times picking this up, not because of the length of it. Because when I pick up a comic book, I want to read about Superman beating up the magistrate, or Jason Todd having an adorable little interaction with a little boy that wants to be Blue Hood. I don't want to read about Asian hate, because I have no hate in my heart towards these people. The people that pick up something like this seem a little bit more hateful than the ones that don't. Now, of course, that is stereotyping people, and that's something I want to avoid. But what I also want to say is, how am I going to say this? John Ridley is a black man, a black straight man. Tatsu is an Asian straight woman. Why is it okay now, all of a sudden, for a black man to write an Asian woman, but a dedicated book? But other times people are taken off of books for not being the right gender, sexuality, or color. But because he's a brown man, he's okay? I don't understand it. I think, obviously, it would come from better from an Asian perspective. But because it's coming from John Ridley, should I even take it seriously? DC's telling me for so long that I shouldn't take that stuff seriously. It's always taken down to brass tacks. That's what it is. That's what I want to say. It's always taken down to brass tacks. Woman, Asian. Woman, Asian. Feminism, Asian. Xenophobia, feminism. That's what it's always taken down to, with a little added history. And I'll give him that. He actually knows way more about the Titans than I could ever know. He knows more about the Outsiders than I ever know. Two teams of characters that were never particularly my favorite. But you can't take it down to brass tacks. You have to look at things from Katana's point of view, not dead stop things. And see, this part is all written from Katana's point of view. This is not. This is a dead stop in the story structure about Vincent Chin, a 27-year-old Chinese American that was killed. This has not a single thing to do with Katana. Not a single thing, this entire page. I'm not kidding. I'm leaving it on here so you can take a look, but not a single thing to do with it. And then it jumps right back into the story. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I did like how she said, Batman gave her Gabby for her humanity, not necessarily even Gabby's, but for hers. All right, let's get into it. Everybody remembers Slade Wilson, right? Slade Wilson. RAPED, Tara Markov, not with physical force. He coerced her, an underage. You know what drives me crazier than anything else is when something like this is brought back out, when works of people like Christopher Priest has done to reshape and revamp characters. You're spitting on the legacy of Christopher Priest. Why? He's done so much work to make Slade a likable character since the Tara situation. And then you've got people like Bleeding Cool coming out saying, George Perez said the same thing. No, not if you give them context. He actually didn't. And then he goes on to say, but history is written by the living and not the dead, right? Actually, history is written by the victors, but he calls him a pedophilic rapist. Oh, demonetized. But even so, we learn more about Gabby. This page right here, I am going to tell you right now, this was the best page of the entire 3 books because it gave depth to the character. It showed growth in the character. She was she's heartless, right? It's Katana. She's a mercenary. She was heartless for a long time. And Gabby brought out the humanity in her, and even more so, took her to a concert. She finally felt alive, felt heavenly. It felt wonderful. I loved it. I'll tell you what, this page was actually a very nice surprise coming from John Ridley. I will give him that. It was really good. And I'm going to skip through a lot of this. Another dead stop in the story to talk about the Japanese internment. Not saying these things didn't exist at all. At all. I don't want that to be mistaken. It was terrible. America should be fucking ashamed. But what does that have to do with Katana? Why did you dead stop the story? Another one right here. Talking about this Japanese woman killing a black woman. Dead stop in the story. We're at 3. We're going to keep track of these. I think that might be the last one. A lot of times it doesn't make sense. They talk about the death of Superman. I mean no ill will, and I tell you, I had a very complicated relationship with Cal. I don't mind when characters are jealous at all. I don't want to say that. They accepted this man. They don't blame Cal, but he also represents everything that is systematically wrong with America. He was accepted because he was white, is what you're saying. So this is all the history of the DC. Yeah, that's great. But it's not told from her perspective. It's like people mourn, people did this. Tell me from Katana's perspective, how did she feel? That's a shame. So basically one day, she was killing people, and she's noticed one that would have been the same age as, one of her boys before they died, or before they were murdered. And she hesitates, and Lady Shiva takes advantage of that and kills her. And they talk about, I did really like the Ouroboros. We as people constantly feed off our weakness, but in turn, it is the embrace of our weakness that makes us stronger. I really, really did like that line. I actually sat there and thought for a little bit. I'm like, how do I embrace my weakness? Do I just stop caring how I talk? Do I just stop caring? It's impossible. I've lived with body dysmorphia for so long. It's impossible. So anyways, we see a little bit more about her death, right? And Lady Shiva and it's just basically wrapping it up, right? And all the different teams she's been on. She's been on Suicide Squad. She's worked with Ivy. She's done this. She's done that. It's wonderful. And that's the end. But there's a lot I skipped. There's a lot of anti-Americanness in this. There's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment in this. There's a lot of not DC in this. And that's the whole point of buying this book, right? A $6 book. I think it was $5.94 on Comixology. What's the point? You're not entertaining. I get you're trying to lead us to a point where we either accept our weaknesses and become better people by it. That's kind of, what it's been the theme. Sometimes it's not possible. If you really think about my personal biggest weakness is since I've been 12 or 13 years old, I've had body dysmorphia. Sometimes I can't look in the mirror. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night counting my ribs. Sometimes I do dumb things like that. If I could fix it, I would. What you need to do, instead of saying, you have to embrace these things, is you also have to learn coping mechanisms. And I've learned that along the way. So, boy, oh boy. But you didn't expect a fucking lecture from me. God, it's so bad. Anyways, so this is getting pretty long, but I apologize for going in it too much, but I'm getting maybe too political. I don't know. But damn, DC Comics, this is supposed to be about Katana, not about the history of America and how bad it is. Get it, you don't like America. Move. Fucking move. Fucking move. If you don't like America, there's a lot of things you take advantage of too. Talk about embracing things. Realize how much you take advantage of. Jeez, oh Pete. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.